The history of Eastern State Penitentiary often centers the experiences of men who lived and worked here.
But women also played a significant, yet largely forgotten role in the prison's history.
Between 1831 and 1923, approximately 1,000 women were incarcerated at Eastern State, a prison designed primarily for men.
These women came from all walks of life and often faced unique challenges.
Their stories are sometimes hidden in the archives,
But today, we'll uncover their experiences.
In April of 1831, Eastern State received its first female prisoners, Amy Rogers, Henrietta Johnson, Ann Hinson, and Eliza Anderson. All four were women of color, each convicted of manslaughter. Their arrival marked the start of nearly a century of women being incarcerated at the penitentiary.
During these years, Eastern State operated under a system of solitary confinement in which prisoners were not permitted to interact with one another. Still, women were grouped together and segregated from men, a practice that continued after Eastern State moved away from solitary confinement and toward a congregate system of living.
Beginning in the mid-1800s, women were assigned to Cell Block 7 and later moved to Cell Block 2, where they had access to outdoor yard spaces. Cell Block 2 continued to house female prisoners until the last woman left the penitentiary in 1923.
Women's labor at Eastern State focused heavily on domestic work, sewing, cooking, and cleaning, instead of the skilled trades offered to men. These jobs were seen as preparing women for life in service roles after release. Women even cooked for the warden and were assigned various tasks that sometimes contradicted the system of solitary confinement and even led to escape.
Managing and caring for incarcerated women was the role of the matron, a female staff member whose job was to oversee the women's well-being. The first matron, Harriet Hall, took on this responsibility in 1831. She organized recreation, medical care, and punishments for the women. But despite the importance of this role, the matron's salary was significantly lower than that of male prison staff.
Prison life for women was not easy. They faced physical and mental health challenges with inadequate medical facilities, especially for women's specific needs. At least 25 women gave birth while incarcerated at Eastern State, often without adequate care. Records mention pregnancies, but details on women's medical treatments remain sparse.
At least 5 women incarcerated at Eastern State were formerly enslaved, including Elizabeth Robinson, who escaped from slavery in South Carolina only to end up at Eastern State. Women like Elizabeth were caught between the brutalities of slavery and the oppressive structures of the criminal justice system. Despite efforts to keep men and women separated, communication between the two still happened. Some women engaged in romantic relationships, including same-sex relationships, despite harsh punishments for those caught breaking the rules.
Punishments such as solitary confinement or loss of privileges were common and mirrored the ways men were punished at Eastern State. Throughout Eastern State's history, women found ways to support each other and express themselves. In 1907, Laura Irons cared for Essie Pollitt's baby after Pollitt gave birth in prison, keeping the child until her release. In 1917, Eva Cole's poem, Ode to Mr. Mouse, became one of the few works by an incarcerated woman published in the Umpire.
The Women's Auxiliary of the Honor and Friendship Club, a prisoner welfare group, helped incarcerated women and their families in the early 20th century. Women at Eastern State also signed petitions urging legislative action on issues important to them, and sometimes returned to the prison after their release to deliver food and offer support.
As the years passed, reformers, especially women's rights activists, began to push for better prison conditions. Public outcry and growing concern about the treatment of female prisoners led to investigations into Eastern State.
In 1923, after years of pressure, women were finally transferred out of Eastern State to a new women's prison called Muncie in central Pennsylvania. Today, Muncie is one of 2 prisons for women in the state.
Today, women are the fastest growing segment of the American prison population. Incarcerated women today still face many of the same challenges that women at Eastern State faced, from inadequate health care to unequal treatment. How might a justice system designed to meet the unique needs of women differ from what we have today?